during the last meeting, but welcome to our town hall, and thanks for all of you for coming out on a rainy night. You are in for a treat tonight, an educational treat. As we get started, I wanted to introduce Director of Planning, Steve Cover, who's joined us. Steve, you're a busy guy, evening meetings this week, so we appreciate you taking the time to be with us. And remember, for those who stay, we have an open bar tonight, so at the end of the meeting, we hope you will have a glass of wine or something. So just as far as what's going to be happening here, we're going to have our speakers. They're going to take some questions, and then Steve and I are going to do a little kind of a conversational kind of thing. So with no further ado, I've got, as background, I got to know Michael Halflants here 4 or 5 years ago when I started working in the Rosemary. And he and his partner, John Pichette, are known as amongst the premier architectural firms, not only in the city, but in the region. I think you walk into their offices and you see the awards they've won and the product they've done. And, you know, it's just not your normal stuff. It is first class. And so we're so pleased that Michael is traveling now, that John Pichette and Melanie Harris, a partner of the firm, have agreed to put on a presentation about placemaking. Now, I will tell you, honest truth, I didn't know what placemaking was until recently. And they're going to tell you about it and, you know, weave a story of placemaking into the speakers series. Now, again, how many of you saw the speakers series with the urban planners here a couple months ago? But, you know, the links to their presentations are up on the DSCA website, and I would encourage you to watch them. On the poster boards here are some sound bites we took from some of the remarks they made. And I think one thing that was telling was they were talking about what a great city Sarasota is and how we can go from great to greater. So in the remarks tonight, you're going to hear some more about that. So without further ado, I'm going to invite John and Melanie to the stage, and I've asked them to say a little bit about their impressive backgrounds as to kind of kick this off and then get on with what I know is going to be a very, very interesting presentation. So here we go.
Should we use these two mics?
Hello? Hello?
Yeah.
Okay, I briefly wanted to start with this slide because I think this statement is more relevant today than when Winston Churchill made it in 1943. Our cities are growing like crazy. By the year 2050, generally speaking, our cities are expected to be double in size by 2050. So the fact that our buildings are so important in how they shape us, etc. Thank you to the Downtown Condo Association for inviting us, and more specifically to David Lough and Patrick Cannon for having us here. And if I haven't met you before, my name is John Pichette. I'm a founding partner of Halflants and Pichette.
I'm Melanie Harris. I'm the studio director at Halflants and Pichette here in Sarasota. I've been practicing architecture for 25 years. I'm also on the City of Sarasota Historic Preservation Board and a Rosemary District resident.
Just briefly, our office is located in the Rosemary District. Michael and I started here 18 years ago. Quite a lot has changed since we've been here. Initially, you can go to the next slide. Next one. initially, this picture was actually taken in 2014, and you can see it was just empty lot after empty lot, all over the place. Now, of course, a lot of these have filled in, but when we started in 2006, it was even more, it was even more vacant land than that. There's a lot of architects in the neighborhood, there's a couple photographers, there were a couple of graphic designers, but basically it was all people that were starting out, and it was a low rent district at that time. Since we've been in the Rosemary district, there's 8 projects that we have been involved with, and we'll talk about these a little bit later, but I'm privileged to actually have a hand in these projects and that we've helped shape this neighborhood.
So we are going to talk about our projects more specifically, but before we do that, we wanted to sort of talk about the fundamentals of urban planning that relate to architectural design. And this really is sort of a continuation of the discussions that were started with the Architecture Sarasota series, talking about placemaking and the public realm. So we're going to go through some of these concepts, and one of the things I wish there was more of in that architecture series was examples of how things work or don't work in Sarasota. So that's actually what we're going to use as our own city here as examples for these fundamental concepts. Before we move on to the next slide, though, I wanted to talk just a little bit about diversity, which is a little bit more of an abstract concept rather than like, a piece of architectural design. But it's relevant in the work that we do because we do a lot of residential and particularly multifamily. So diversity, of course, has to do with the larger idea of having a mix of people from various races and religions and ages, income levels. And with the projects that we're doing, where we have the opportunity to work with the client to come up with a variety of unit sizes, we push on that, and John will talk about that a little more. So when we talk about diversity, we're talking about creating the types of spaces that a variety of ages and income levels could afford to live in. That was one of the things that Dwani talked about, was instead of building a building that has 12 2 to 3 bedroom units for millions of dollars, you could build a building that has 24 one-bedroom units, which will help get people of different incomes and different age groups back into the city. All right, so massing is a pretty basic concept. Here in the city, it's about zoning and what zoning allows for your maximum building envelope, but that's not what makes architectural design. The idea is that you take that envelope that's established by setbacks and building height requirements, and then you carve that volume. And it's also important that you think about the proportions of that building. How can you break it down into smaller pieces? How can you incorporate more human-scaled elements, particularly at the street level? Next. So here's an example right here in the Rosemary district. It's sort of a tale of 2 blocks. We've got Arcos, down on the corner of Fruitville and Central, and then we've got Rosemary Square, on Boulevard of the Arts in Central. And while Arcos is a larger complex, it really did stick to what the maximum envelope is, more than Rosemary Square did. Rosemary Square allowed for that public plaza to be created as part of the overall development, and in the process took private development and welcomed the public into it. So really expanded the boundary of the public realm in that particular case. You can go to the next slide. So the difference in the pedestrian experience is pretty drastic. At Rosemary Square, you have the plaza. And by the way, this is actually a photograph, not a rendering. So that's an event that actually took place in Rosemary Square and on Boulevard of the Arts. And it just shows you that, again, the public realm has been expanded. People have been welcomed into that space. And even along the rest of the building where we've got various commercial spaces, the way that the building sort of moves in and out is much more welcoming. It can be much more relatable to the human experience. When you walk along Arcos, they've pulled back from the property line and created a vegetated buffer there. And then the windows are a little bit elevated and don't include any sort of entrances or exits for the residents of that building. And when you walk down that length, you'll see mostly windows, blinds pulled down, because the relationship between public and private there isn't necessarily a friendly one. So this is an idea of how to incentivize landowners, developers to create more of these public spaces, to pull their buildings back and not build to the maximum envelope that's allowed by code. And the idea here is, it's a trade. Whatever amount of volume you're giving back as part of the public realm, you're getting as an increase in volume, atop your building. So, you get a better street experience, but you also get more interesting buildings when you look at the skyline. So then there's the relationship of the building to the street, and it can vary, by type of use of that space, but also, we have examples here that are commercial spaces. We know that this is kind of the best of our downtown area along Main Street, where we have lots of doors. Therefore, you have lots of activity that's encouraged to be passing through those doors. Lots of storefronts, and but it can also be done at a residential scale, like literally residences on the street. And we go to the next slide. So these are the more traditional porches and stoops that you see in other urban environments. And here, in the Rosemary district, these examples happen to be more traditional building styles, but that doesn't have to be a traditional building style. It could be any kind of architecture and still incorporate those kinds of features.
And actually, this Citrus Square is a good-sized project, but they did a really good job in breaking down the scale of the building.
And making relationships at both the first and second floor level with the balconies that also, bring life from inside out and outside in. So we also have not so great examples of this in our downtown area, one of which being the First Street side of the Whole Foods parking garage. And actually, I think it's the Second Street side. On the First Street side, there's lots of stores, and so you get that healthy relationship. They had to build a parking garage. That's a necessary evil. But what they could have done here is they could have created some breaks along the wall so that pedestrians could pass through as a shortcut, and you would activate the street a lot more in a scenario like that. So it could be a simple gesture like that. And then this is a storefront that actually had a little a business in it recently that within like a month moved down to Main Street. It's a tough spot because you're pulled back from the sidewalk, and there's an elevation change, so now you've got a barrier with the guardrail, and then they came and put a plant in front of it because it was a weird blank spot on the sidewalk. So it's the kind of thing that it's like it's almost there, but there are a couple characteristics to it that make it not such a great place for a retail business. And then this was actually a project that Dwani mentioned in his lecture, talking about some spaces that are built that are kind of doomed to fail from the start. And this is of course our gateway to the Rosemary district at Boulevard of the Arts in Tamiami. And on both sides of the street here, we have buildings that do not engage the sidewalk. And then furthermore, the business the commercial space that's at the base of the high rise, it's elevated from the street. You can't see into it well. You can't enter it from the street level, and you have to really penetrate the public-private boundary to get into it, which is why it hasn't had any use to it since it got built.
It was the boulevard. It was a boulevard, right?
Yes, Boulevard of the Arts, and I think it's not the Embassy Hotel, it's a condo
Boulevard,
building, right?
Boulevard
Oh, it's
condo.
called the Boulevard, sorry. So transparency is then another component of how you use architecture to relate to the public realm. Of course, that often means glazing, like literally having view into spaces. But beyond that are even the entries. Again, doors open, you get to see into those spaces as you're walking by, and it becomes the area that you'd prefer to be in. Here we started with the not so great examples, where we have long expanses of nothing, so there's no way to engage, from the sidewalk. And then even where we have a storefront, the shades are pulled down, the doors have obscured film on them. It's again a very separate relationship from something healthy for the public realm. And then, as you get further down on Main Street from the sort of the Lemon Orange Central area, we all know that the success of that corridor breaks down. We have large lots. We have less of the sort of covered sidewalk. And here's an area that it has a really nice courtyard if you look into it. But as far as again engaging with the public realm, it's decided to not engage the public realm. And so, as far as good examples, of course, lots of the Main Street stores and the Rosemary District stores have great transparency, welcoming you in, putting things worth viewing up near the windows, having good lighting from the inside out. So even I like the example of the Main Street extension. This always cracks me up. It's like one side of the street near the Zenith has a clear walking path. The other side has, tons of cafes, and people always choose to walk on the crowded side of the street. And it's, it might take you longer to get from corner to corner, but it's a much more pleasant experience. Oh, and as far as Halflants and Pichette office, John sits in the front window, and people are walking by all day, waving to him. Sometimes people stop in, so you really do get that engagement. So of course, structured shade is a major component of buildings here in Florida, where we have to deal with the sun and the heat, and also rainstorms like tonight. And so to have those canopies that come out, extend beyond the property line, and the right kind of canopies. They have to be kind of down low to protect you from the weather and make you kind of feel safe as you're walking by. So, there again can be examples that are historic, traditional, and also modern. And then I mentioned this earlier. As you get further down Main Street towards Washington, we have more open lots, parking, less businesses, and less shade, less protection. And so it becomes a matter of just wanting to walk by there as fast as possible rather than places to pause and enjoy your time. So you had structured shade, and then of course we also have organic shade in the form of trees. And I was reading through your boards earlier, and that was something that a lot of the speakers talked about. Here in Sarasota we have fantastic flora. Unfortunately, most of it's on private property, which makes it vulnerable. It's very hard to regulate vegetation on private property. So instead we should turn our attention to the streets and the planting of street trees. If you look at other cities that have have really committed to street tree planting, even 20, 30 years later, you have a really nice canopy, and you can use different species of trees to to give a different brand to different neighborhoods. So what you end up with in the end are green lines on an aerial instead of gray lines. So we have lots of opportunity for street trees, and with all the development that's taking place here, each one of those, if they added street trees, we would eventually have that consistent line. And it's important that the street trees not only exist, but that they're the right kind of trees that can withstand being next to a roadway and all the weather that goes along with that, and also are dense enough to create that canopy. Driveways are a major conflict with street trees. So when we're looking at developments, that's something we need to consider, is how much of the curb is being broken up and where are those opportunities to plant street trees. And then this kind of pulls in all of the different elements, but the whole idea is to create places for people. And when we design architecture, we're doing that almost like the residual space. But there's also the intentionally designed space that's part of the public realm. And John and I were talking about the park that's at 5 Points. It's a beautiful green space, but it's not occupiable. The edges of it are occupiable, and there's great programming all year long that happens on the edges, but there's very few places to actually be within the park itself. There are some benches, they're not very often, and then they're all turned away from the park rather than to it. And while we have beautiful buildings all around it, even those buildings don't offer a place to pause, to look back and enjoy the park. You know, there aren't any tables and chairs along, you know, the arcades or even, you know, at Selby, where we could be taking better advantage and creating a more lively space there.
And I'll just add quickly that all three of these pictures were taken during season, during lunch, and there wasn't anybody around. And you go one block over on Main Street or whatever with the restaurants and the outdoor tables and everything, and it is crowded.
And we're sort of preaching to the choir with this slide, but you know, there are some fantastic examples of, you know, those green spaces that, you know, the intentionally designed public realm happening here, and within the, you know, the zone that you're all participating in. Of course, there's the bay and all the great things that came out of that. But I also, you know, Parkside is a great example of private development that also is welcoming in the public. You know, they have this really cute sign about come hang out, and they have all that seating and a fire pit, and you don't have to spend a dime to use any of that. And then, of course, you know, our what's going to happen any day now is that Rosemary pocket park. But you know, the point that I wanted to bring up with that park is, look at how there are people actually occupying the center of it. You know, grass doesn't mean stay off. It, you know, it means lay down, you know, enjoy the sun. And so the design of it really promotes that type of utilization, both on the perimeter and the paved areas, but also in that nice green space in the center.
Okay, what I want to do now is just briefly talk about the projects that we've had going on in the Rosemary District and a couple that aren't in the Rosemary District, and give you some examples about how we've tried to take all of the concept, the massing, the street relationship, the building transparency, the structured shade, trees and plants, diversity, and places for people. The first project that I want to talk about is the Risen Unfit. This is where our office is. You know, we pushed and pulled this building so we don't have a flat facade going all the way down the street. We did this structured shade that goes all along the whole way. The ground floor is all 6 commercial spaces. They're all fully transparent with glass. And also up on the roof, we put a big structured shade. The one thing about the Risen as well is we did create some diversity here. This project was well under the design phase when we went to the developer and we said, hey, we have some structured parking in the back. Why don't we put some smaller affordable units on top of the structured parking? So what we did is there's 6 units back here. They're about 600 square foot each. They're 1 bedroom. And it just allows some diversity where a young couple could afford to live downtown. These were the first 6 units that sold out. This project is on 4th Street, the Vanguard Lofts. It has had its struggles. It has seen a couple developers. It's in the hands of the bank right now again for the 2nd time, and they are starting to work on it. It is taking shape. But here again, you know, we broke up the massing of the building. We broke it up into a smaller scale. There's more affordable units on the ground floor that are live-work, and then we have 2-story loft units with a rooftop deck up here. There is some amenities here for all the building to share. One thing, you know, this has a relationship to the street and the sidewalk. There's a front stoop, there's transparency, and it would be a nice place for live-work. This place, Zerata, has been completed. Once again, you know, we tried to deal with the massing by pushing and pulling some of the structure. We have one thing that's pretty neat about this, and we talk about many doors. This actually, the 6 residential units and the 6 commercial units are accessed from the sidewalk, and there's actually 12 doors that are on the sidewalk. You can see here where we tried to create a sidewalk that was fun and functional. The units that enter the residential are straight on, and the commercial spaces are on an angle. Also, the residential units are 2-story spaces where you walk in, but it's more private. And then the commercial space is a 1-story entrance, but it's all glass with transparency. This was the 2nd phase, Zerata 2, which is under construction. Hopefully will be done in a couple months. And once again, you can see, we took the building here and we divided it up, and we got 3 exterior stair towers that run all the way through. So it kind of helps with the massing of the building. The ground floor, once again, is accessible to the sidewalk, and there are small, but there are commercial spaces down below. This project here, the gallery, is on Coconut and 4th. This should start construction within the next couple months. They've already pre-sold quite a few of the units. Coconut, where some more, the busier street, we've anchored the building with a restaurant space at the ground floor. And then the units going on 4th Street are more, they're live-work units, and they relate more to the street. And also you can see here where we broke the massing up. This module right here is repeated 4 times. So it doesn't look like just one big long facade that goes across, but there are some breaks in it, and it gives it a better scale. This is some of the units on 4th Street. You can see that they're accessible from a stoop with full transparency and glass. We have small planters here, but then we have more of a buffer that protects people from the traffic in the street. This is just a couple more examples of projects that we have in the Rosemary district. Villa Bellata, which is under construction right now, and then Boheme, which will, within the next year, hopefully be under construction. But on Villa Bellata, you can see where we have these stair towers that we push back, and then really we broke the scale of the building down to these 3 elements. And then on the ground floor, once again, it does relate to the sidewalk, and to the trees, and to the pedestrians, and there are some commercial spaces down below. If you can go back one. So, this one right here too, it wasn't, what we did here, we didn't just go setback to setback to setback and go up with the building. We actually pulled the building back quite a bit, and we created these large balconies and overhangs for the building, just to give it, a better scale. This project right here is, we've always kind of considered it the gateway to the city. This is up at the 14th Street roundabout, and it's right across from the Bayfront Park. So because of the roundabout, we ended up with a curved structure here. So here from the roundabout, you can see the view. We created this big aperture with a stair going up to it. So we tried to encourage all the residents that they'll be able to walk down and walk right across and utilize that park more, and then vice versa. Also on the street, we've created, there's 10,000 square foot of commercial space. So we envision cafes, restaurants, et cetera, being on the ground floor.
I also just want to point out that the grand stair, which is open to the public, will be an awesome place to watch the sunset.
Exactly. One thing too, that from the very beginning, we had intentions of saving this grand tree. And what we found over the years is that a site that has more restrictions on it, or more restraints, I should say, like the roundabout or the grand tree, actually encourages, I think, better and more interesting architecture. This is just kind of a quick section that shows you the retail space, the garden units, which have the garden, little courtyards in the back, and then 2-story loft spaces. The last project I'll show you really quick is the Sarasota Bath and Racket, and this is a much bigger scale than any of the other projects. But this project too, we had to work with the scale of the buildings. There's residential here. We started with a 2-story structure here, and then we went up higher. But these houses can get torn down in time, and you can put 3-story, you can go 35 feet, so you'll be higher, or just as high as this building here. You can go to the next slide. So here's kind of a site plan of the overall. And we created a pedestrian path that was open to the public for the whole community. They can walk along the whole property, they can cut through the property here, and then we actually given back with the dog park as well. There's indoor pickleball courts, there's a bunch of commercial space there for restaurants, for businesses, and then we have 270 residential units. And those units too offer a lot of diversity. There's loft spaces, there's a 2-bedroom, there's 3-bedroom. One of the things too, we have this main circulation space that goes to the clubhouse, that goes to the tennis courts. But all these units down here on the ground floor, we've created these courtyards too. So people walking all the time will be walking here, and it gives them some privacy. There's a little buffer between, you know, the circulation and the units. And this just kind of shows you in plan an example of that, where we have our unit, where we have this little private courtyard, and then the circulation spaces out here. But this still allows you to have an interaction with people and to talk to people, but it gives you privacy. This is just a glimpse of inside one of the modules where we're trying to commit, we're trying to make places where people can meet and people can gather, and not just create, try to create a community there. This path is open to the public, the dog park, and people can walk right through it and walk around the whole property. And that's it. If you have any questions? Yes?
Is it true that city code mandates that you have to have tinted glazing on your storefronts?
No,
Are you sure?
we don't have it on our office.
Well, is yours the old office though?
No, our new office. Well, are you talking just recently in the code? If so, I don't know about that, but no, I don't believe so. I mean, that's a shame if it does.
That's why when you go by so many of the stores, the reflection.
Well, I bet that they put film on those storefronts.
Yeah. You might check it. I'm pretty sure it's a requirement for retail.
No, I mean, that's the first I've heard of that. Steve, do you know? It's not a requirement, no. And it's a shame, honestly, we did mention briefly about people that walk in front of our office all the time. And I've gotten to know quite a few people in the building. They walk their dogs every day, they wave every day, and sometimes they come in. And you guys are all welcome to come in too. We have a lot of models, we have a lot of, we have a good space, and it's welcome.
John, question, placemaking. Would you define placemaking? Tell us what placemaking is.
I would think that, like what they've done at the Arts and Central, that becomes a place. They've made a place, they've made an outdoor place with the park across the street. It's going to be a place that can feed off each other with the Artisan Cheese Factory, with Wolfie's, with Spice Station. I ordered food out the other day, and it would have been great to walk across, and I will, once it's complete, walk across to eat in the park. So creating that pocket park is creating a space for people to gather and people to meet.
Yeah, I'd say that you have to have the right combination of characteristics that make people want to be there, make it a destination that people come to. You can just make a big space, but if it doesn't have all those characteristics we talked about, comfort and places really that just sit and to be, then you haven't really created a place. You've just created a space.
I have a question. The 14th Street Circular
Yes.
Building, when is that going to be done?
Yeah, we're doing the construction drawings right now. So,
Like 2 years?
no, well, by the time it's complete, 2 years, yeah. Well, thank you very much.
Question? What other, one of the challenges in Sarasota and all the parks and the open green spaces is the homeless and how much you can control or not. I mean, I don't want to be prejudiced against the homeless, but it's a challenge.
No, it's a challenge for sure, but that doesn't mean we should make parks that aren't usable or aren't accessible to everybody. I mean, that park at 5 Points is beautiful, but I never see anybody in there, and I walk by there quite often.
Well, and there's an interesting thing that happens when you create a place that people want to be. It actually makes it more difficult for homeless people to, to really sort of set up camp there and spend a long time there because you just have a larger cross section of people. So it's not so easy.
Yeah. Hi, Peter Belenton. So it looks like a lot of your architecture harkens back to Paul Rudolph and Sarasota School of Architecture. Is that intentional, or am I sort of making that up?
No.
Too much wine or something?
It's not really, I would say on our multifamily projects, it's not too intentional. I would say if you know of our single family custom residences, yes, we do take more of the concepts on that, where we create indoor-outdoor spaces that are kind of float together, large overhangs, a lot of shade, and we do, incorporate a lot of those principles. It's a little bit more difficult on the larger multifamily stuff. But good design is good design. We do try to incorporate a lot of that as well.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. That was terrific. Now we're going to turn to a part of the program where Steve, I'm going to have a conversation with Steve Colbert. So we're going to get a couple chairs set up here. And one of the goals of what DSCA is trying to do here is build on the momentum that was started by the speakers series. And I'm going to scoot up a little bit. So turn a little bit this way, Steve, because of that. Come around this way. Okay, one of the things we wanted to do was build on the momentum of the speakers series that was, turned out terrifically. We had a workshop here with a panel discussion with Howard Davis on it and trying to build that. And then this was kind of to embroider on that, a little bit different perspective of some of the really great stuff and principles that are being used in the city. So we've used, if you haven't had a chance to look at some, we've just got some sound bites there from some of the speakers and whatever. So it was really thought-provoking. Steve, I wanted to, following on to this great presentation and the speaker series thing, I think there's an emerging consensus to update the downtown plan. And I'm hearing, I met with Marlon the other day, and I think he's behind it. I know Mayor Alpert is behind it, and I'm told it may be an agenda item for the commission meeting on the 15th. What are some of your key takeaways from the speaker series? I'll share some of mine, but what were some of your key, 4 events? What do you feel you learned, or there were some aha moments?
Yeah, thanks, Dave. It's great to be here tonight. There were 4 very different speakers, but there were some consistencies in their message. Obviously, what David said with taking a look at updating our downtown plan. It's about 24 years old right now. And there's really some interesting history behind that. Anyway, so I think that was one of the big takeaways, like you said. I think too, many of them, I think all 4 of them mentioned how great Main Street is. And Main Street really, when you're talking about placemaking, Main Street is definitely one of those places that everybody loves. And I think there are a lot of different approaches to Main Street. As you're probably aware, there is a project to take a fresh look at Main Street. And I think one of the things we got from them was, it's already great now, don't mess with it and go backwards. And I think that was a very clear message from all 4 speakers. And so, as this effort goes forward, and there was actually an open house last night to take a look at Main Street, we have to make sure that we don't do anything but really improve Main Street as we move forward. Gosh, there were so many other things. They were talking about we really need to be looking at the future in terms of building more energy efficient buildings. There was some discussion about sea level rise and something that we need to look forward to in the future. Obviously, it's not big issue short-term, it could be a big issue long-term. A lot of talk about placemaking, and I think, if I can, David, I've been in this field for a long time, and placemaking has really been a big part of my career wherever I've been. And starting with Fulton County, there's a community called Serenby. How many of you have been to Serenby? It's about 20 minutes west of the Atlanta airport. It's actually kind of an English hamlet, new town type project that started from scratch. We actually had to change zoning and everything to make this happen. It was basically zoned for 1 acre lots, suburban sprawl. We completely rewrote the zoning. We included transfer development rights. If you go there today, it truly is one of the most spectacular villages or English hamlet projects you ever see, and every place is a place to enjoy there. I also, when I was at the City of Atlanta, the Beltline project, how many of you are familiar with the Beltline project? Okay, so a number of you. When I was at the City of Atlanta, we actually laid the groundwork and came up with zoning that had never been done before to make that happen. And in terms of large cities, that's probably probably considered maybe one of the best placemaking projects, even in the country.
All right, the one central theme that I'm remembering from each of the speakers was community involvement, and and the importance of community involvement as any city plan is updated. How, as we move forward to consider the update, what are some of your thoughts on community involvement, on the process for maybe even the selection of the firm, and then moving forward, how the community is in the process and engaged?
I think one of the things that was really clear from the speakers is that we really need to get, not only are we planning for the future for those who live here today, but for future generations. And there was a big emphasis on reaching out more to the younger population, the millennials, the younger people who are working in the city, because really these future plans really are for them and their kids. And so, that's something we need to think about as we move forward on any of these initiatives. In terms of, the current population, they were pretty vocal, David, about, when you're planning or doing a project, it's for the benefit of the entire city, not just who lives around it. I think a number of them were very clear about that. Certainly public input is a critical piece. In anything that we do and anything that we have done here in the city, we reach out to everyone. Not only the communities, the business group, we reach out and talk with everybody to get their feedback and their ideas. And from that feedback and their ideas, we put together a series of recommendations, and eventually we take it to the planning board and the commission. So we are, and I know CCNA is putting together some recommendations for greater public input, and we're waiting for their recommendations.
Thank you. Just let me close off this section with asking, timing-wise, is it? I'm sensing a motivation to get on with this. As far as, do you have any, as far as timing for, maybe a scope or whatever, and the budget discussions for next year in earnest? Are you sensing, timing-wise, that Marlon and the commission would like to really get on with this, as opposed to kind of talking about it, shall I say?
Yeah, without a doubt. Obviously on the 15th, Commissioner Liz Alpert is going to be bringing this up, that we need to move forward with taking a fresh look at updating the downtown plan. From that, we will then come back to the commission later this year to identify, what the process should be to do this, timing, the overall schedule. We're probably looking at hiring an outside consultant to assist us with this, so they would have budget impacts. So that's something that we'll be working on, eventually coming back to the commission to report, what we would be recommending. Then it'll be up to the commission to say, all right, that's the approach we would like to take in updating the downtown plan, and then we go from there.
Well, I mean, one of my the quotes I heard from one of the speakers was, "What are you doing with your prosperity? How are you investing your prosperity?" And I think the community, I speak for myself, is if we're going to do this, let's do it right with a top-notch firm and a great selection process, just like we use some of the Bay Park work and just going with Sasaki or some really first-rate firms. Let me digress here a little bit. Could you talk a little bit about the planning department's role and development services? The expectations of, when projects come along that are met with a degree of controversy, say the Obsidian or One Park, where the relationship between planning and the rules, so as to speak, for what can get built, and then there are, the enforcement of those rules, shall we say. Some of the subtleties of late, there's been discussion about the pedestrian experience, and some of the developers have balked at where is that in the code. Of course, from a resident standpoint, I think we would all sign on to some of these somewhat more subjective kind of terms. But talk to us about planning and development services and I mean, in some cases the subtleties or the loopholes that we all, I think, as a community would agree are better pedestrian experiences.
That is a great question, and I'm glad I'm here to really explain this, because a lot of people do not understand the responsibilities of the planning department and development services. The planning department, which I head up, we actually we do not run the planning board. I know that sounds a little odd, but the planning board is not under our jurisdiction. It is actually under development services. The planning department does a variety of things. We obviously do long-range planning, anything related to the comprehensive plan. We're responsible for historic preservation, and I have to say, I think we have one of the best historic preservation programs in the state. We're also responsible for public art. The public art master plan that just came out was created from our department. Everybody probably knows Nancy Kelly. She's responsible for working with all the neighborhoods and handling grants that go out to the various neighborhoods. We do write zoning text amendments, but we do not enforce them, and I'll get into that a little bit later. We also have economic development within our office, sustainability. We used to have transportation planning, but now that's shifted over to the Public Works Department. And so a lot of this is really related to big picture things versus actual projects. The processing of rezonings, of major projects, really all projects, building permits, building inspections, code enforcement, all of those things are the responsibility of the Development Services Department. And so I get a lot of questions about the Obsidian project or others that maybe are a little bit more controversial. We actually play a very minor role in those. We are just one member of the Development Review Committee that just makes recommendations as to it relates to maybe the overall comprehensive plan, but we do not get involved with development projects hardly at all. So.
Okay, but yeah, so this pedestrian experience thing and the pushback, I'm seeing some of that and really important stuff. So yeah.
Yeah, I'd really like to respond to that. I know when I first got here, the Boulevard project was working its way through the process. And I just remember looking at the plans and going, wow, what are we doing here? Yeah, it's an attractive building, but there's nothing on the sidewalk that really is pedestrian friendly. And there's some other projects some of you are very aware of that have that same situation where it's a very narrow sidewalk, maybe some palm trees, and that's about it. And you know, we decided you know, a while back we can't keep doing this. I actually sat in on the meeting where a hotel was being proposed on Fruitville Road, and at the entrance of the hotel, along its entire front facade, they had a 3-foot sidewalk and a 4-foot sidewalk on Fruitville Road. And I said, I don't care what the code says, we're not doing this. You know, and we told the developer, look, come on, you got to be realistic. That's not going to be good for your hotel either. And they actually backed off, and actually we never saw them again, but which was a good thing. But we recognize, you know, and these most recent zoning text amendments, not only for downtown, but on the commercial corridors, you know, we're trying as best as we can, and under the laws and, you know, the limitations we have sometimes legally, to get as much, improve the pedestrian experience and get as much sidewalk and landscaping as we possibly can.
Related to longer-term planning, one thing that's been under discussion now for a few years is 3D modeling. Modeling in 3 dimensions so we can all see if we're tinkering with mass or height or public realm treatment, so we can all see it. And I sit through most city commission meetings, and Steve, you know, I'm in a lot of things, and I can attest that I think if people could see what is being proposed and what is being envisioned for zoning, it would, a picture's worth 1,000 words. I was pleased to hear that some baseline, you know, of 3D modeling might be on the horizon. It's my personal opinion, it's worth a fair bit of money to do this, because the frictional costs of having people with 30 t-shirts, you know, red t-shirts at every city commission meeting is probably, there may be a better way. So what specifically can you say about 3D modeling, and what may be, you know, coming in the budget, and if there's a rough timeline of what you have in mind, what is it?
Yeah, and we really do have good news on this, and we've been talking about this for quite a while. When we first started looking into this, we recognized immediately that the city-based data just wasn't accurate enough for us to do realistic 3-dimensional modeling. What we have done is we've identified a vendor, and we will be able to afford them in this current budget, not the one that we're proposing, but the funding we already have set aside. We're actually in negotiations with them to finalize a contract and create all that baseline data. And this is really amazing. It's within 3-inch accuracy, and it's topography, heights of buildings, where every outstructure is located. Actually, I was kind of joking with Lucia and saying, you know, it's mostly aerial photographic material. I said you'll be able to probably spot some zoning violations out there just by using this information as well. So, but anyway, we're in negotiations with them right now. It looks like that's going to go forward. They can create it extremely fast. We will have it, if, you know, once we secure them and we give them the green light to move forward, we probably will have that information, I would say, in 3 months. And so then we would have all the baseline data in place, and then from that, then we can actually do the 3D modeling. So we're very excited about this. This has been a long time coming.
Yeah, well, that's great news. Let me turn to trees. A lot of discussion about trees, and you will know from our meeting how I'm trying to do, in a small way, get what I'll call a street plan for 4th and 5th. One of the things that I found, one is that like 5 different city departments are involved in this, right? And one of the ongoing stumbling blocks is the location of utilities. And in my experience, having worked in this area for 5 years or so, 80% of the time, it turns out that utilities almost turn out to be deal breakers. If we're serious about trees and green space, and you know, I know there's some projects in the Rosemary moving ahead, that every tree on the block, 93 of them are going to be removed. And they get replaced, some of them are in courtyards or stuff, but we've got to plant more trees. What about the, how do we balance property rights with the need and the want for trees as we develop our streets, before everything is palms or nothing?
Well, first of all, and we're looking to doing this at the city, is that just because there's a water line there doesn't mean it can't be relocated. And so as these projects come in, that's one of the first things we're looking at, or will be looking at, is, okay, can that water line, those are the easiest utility lines to relocate. So actually move them so that trees, more substantial trees can be planted along the street. In addition, our zoning text amendments that passed for downtown and on the commercial corridors, we're requiring a landscaping area along the street that will not only be adequate for palm trees, but easily adequate for shade trees as well. Because we recognize that's really important. And so, with those zoning text amendments that got adopted by the commission, they will be able to plant shade trees, and that's exactly what we're going to be looking for these projects in the future.
Art in roundabouts. I'm kind of aghast, to be honest with you. There was a plan at 10th and 14th where the art was commissioned. It's really sitting in a warehouse now. And the roundabouts were built and, the electric lines stuck to there. And then the quote for installing them came in and everybody had a heart attack. And it said we just look at another location adjacent to it. It just seems criminal in a way that here we have this plan for the roundabouts and the gateway to our city, and the art custom curated for that location, only to be held up by a couple $100,000 for, in a grander scheme of things. Doesn't seem, it's a lot of money, but it's not a lot of money. What can you tell us about that?
Well, I don't know if, I think what was criminal was the bid that we got on the putting in the platforms for the public art. It was so outrageous. And David, it was more than a couple $100,000. It was like $500,000 over what we expected it would be. So we just put a stop to it and said, we're not going to get taken on this. This is really kind of a ripoff. So anyway, we stepped back. We actually have, it's coming back fairly soon, we've actually issued a new RFP for the 14th Street roundabout. We have the public art piece basically ready to go. We're hoping we're going to get a more realistic price. We're approaching it a little bit differently and modifying the scope of the work so that we'll get a much better estimate. And then if we do, we will move forward with installing the art piece that was scheduled for the 14th Street roundabout. For the 10th Street roundabout, we're actually talking with the Bay folks, since that's a major entrance into the Bay project. Will eventually be a major entrance for the future performance center, performing arts center, that we might be able to team up with them and maybe come up with a solution not only for the base, but come up with even a more spectacular art piece there than was originally proposed. Working down the line, we have Fruitville and of course Gulfstream. Still Gulfstream, we're just kind of sitting back and trying to figure out what we want to do with that. Fruitville, there was an art piece that was recommended by the Public Art Committee. The Commission wasn't really thrilled with it. So, you might have to go back to the drawing board on that. But it looks like right now that we have a good chance of moving forward with the 14th Street roundabout. The overall goal is absolutely to get art pieces in the middle of each of these roundabouts. It's just that the prices were so outrageous that it just wasn't. We're just pulling off.
You mentioned Fruitville, and you mentioned Maine and the visioning workshop. There's a school of thought that I subscribe to of Fruitville could be the most transformative kind of project we could all imagine. The barrier it creates between north and south, the lousy street experience, the safety issues, and 5 years ago, for whatever reason, it didn't move ahead, but we're a different city now. We're a more sophisticated commission. We have the Gulf Stream and the Fruitville roundabouts are done. We're not in COVID, so any traffic data we get now should be normalized, so as to speak. But there's a group of us that think Fruitville is if you were looking for top 3 things you could do to transform the city, that it is at or near the top. Do you have a view on that?
I can't agree with you more. I know when we presented that plan, was it 5 years ago? Wow. Long time. Anyway, it really was transformative. And we were really hoping that the commission at that time would have supported it. We had a $10 million funding grant from the state that we sent back. And we were really not happy with that. My opinion, that was a big mistake that was made back then. And you're right, it was transformative. It would have Fruitville Road would look completely different than it does today. You would have much wider sidewalks. Some roundabouts were included with that. It was a beautiful plan. And the transition from north of Fruitville to south of Fruitville and downtown would have been completely different. And you're right, today it's still awful to cross. It's a dividing line between everything north of Fruitville and the downtown area. We fully intend on bringing that back. Everything.
Great, I've heard one member of the commission say there wasn't widespread support for Fruitville. At the time, that's really inaccurate. DSCA was supportive, the Chamber, the DID, the Rosemary Association. So there was support. Yes, there was some degree of controversy, but I've reminded Marlon, I think, supports it and is aware. So if it comes back, I'm pretty confident DSCA will step up.
Yeah, and that's good to hear, because you're absolutely right. Everybody in the whole area supported it. The only group that I know of that didn't support it was Longboat Key.
Transportation, speaking of that, I know it doesn't report up through you, but a slide that I showed before you arrived, a little recap. I looked at downtown a little different way in the last few days, and that was population per square mile. And my estimate is currently the DSCA neighborhood is about 7,000 people per square mile, going to 9,000 people per square mile, with pockets of growth being at the Quay and east along 301. There's as we look at streetscape improvements, is it time that a service like iRide, we have the density now to support bringing back these alternative services, whether it be a water taxi or look at this in a holistic kind of way, where we're not just looking at one dimension and people get sore because they think they're prioritizing bikes and cars are not, it's a socialist conspiracy to get people out of cars but, you know, that we have alternatives that we're looking at in combination with the county, because I know it's the county that runs the bus system. I mean, from a capital P planning standpoint, what can you say about your view on other transportation solutions?
David, these are really good questions. Yeah, when I first got here 7 years ago, it's hard to believe, 7 years ago, all I saw was cars driving everywhere and a mass transit system that had like 3 or 4 people on the buses every time I saw one go by. And having come from Atlanta, which has some transportation issues that I'm sure many of you are familiar with, I said we are not going to go down that path again. And so, you know, we got the Sarasota in Motion Transportation Master Plan completed that had a whole series of recommendations, and we've been implementing those, including Boulevard of the Arts, 10th Street, you know, a variety of them. But a couple of the recommendations there was the creation of a trolley, the Bay Runner trolley. I know when we first introduced it, a lot of people thought no one was going to ride it. We felt differently. And the Bay Runner ridership numbers are just phenomenal. We've already hit, I think like 350,000 since it was introduced 2 Marches ago. Everybody loves it. We also introduced the bike and scooter share. To be honest with you, we were a little nervous about that in terms of what I've seen in other cities and how there was no control where people were leaving them. We actually got a really good vendor here. Not perfect, you know, and it never will be perfect, but they really are a good vendor, and they go out there and they make sure they're corralled and put back in place. The ridership numbers for that are phenomenal too. That's probably over 250,000 since 2 Marches ago. Water taxi, we are working on that. I know we've talked about this for a while, but initially we were just looking at a water taxi system within the city. We've had some new regional interest coming from Bradenton, Longboat Key, and some other areas, and where we could possibly team up and provide a water taxi service. The iRide, it was a great idea that had a terrible business plan, and I think that's really why it didn't make it. We really want to bring back some kind of microtransit. I don't know if it would be exactly the same, but we definitely want to do that. I just remember dealing with that vendor. You know, we had the hotels in the city saying, we'll pay for the driver's salaries. We really like this. So we asked the vendor, have you talked to any of the hotels? Oh, well, that's an interesting idea. And then, you know, during spring training, you know, have you ever thought about running back and forth between the stadium and Rosemary District and other areas? Oh, that's an interesting idea. You know, so their whole marketing plan was, I think, was doomed to fail from the start. But yes, we definitely want to pursue that.
Yeah, and to your point, it was a disaster. The app didn't work, and so here we are 5 or 6 years later with models for business plans having matured and a lot more experience to learn from. One final question, then I want to open it up for questions. You're working on an economic strategic plan, and I saw that in your highlight reports here a few weeks ago, and I applaud that effort. My personal observation is, you know, we've been kind of on a sugar high here the last few years with real estate prices, people moving here, the economy for a lot of folks pretty good. But Sarasota as a city, think of our largest employers, the hospital, the county offices, which are moving out of town, the school system, and, by the way, the arts and cultural community as an employer driver in addition to branding or whatever we call it. But you know, I feel we need some more diversity, and some stuff is not realistic to do, and we're not going to get necessarily a high-tech firm to maybe move to downtown. But I mean, never say never, but talk to us about some of your goals for this economic strategic plan and its importance.
Yeah, another good question. So when I first got here, just from my observations, we really didn't have a true functioning economic development office that needed to be focusing on what it was doing. And to be honest with you, actually, when I first started, economic development was supposed to be under me. And on my first day, I sat down with Tom Barwin and Marlon, and they said, well, we're not going to move economic development under you. We're going to put parking under you. I forgot to mention it in the beginning. So little did I know at the time how popular parking was. Let's give the problem child to the new guy and good luck. That's kind of basically what it was. So anyway, just about every year I would bring up with Tom and Marlon, like I really think I can really help out with economic development. I've done it before in previous cities, and I think there's a lot more we can do with it. So finally, last year, Marlon transferred economic development over to our office, and I said, well, we need certain levels of expertise in this office to really get rolling. We hired Wayne Appleby, actually away from the county. He's the manager of our economic development office, doing a great job. We have Julie Ryan, who actually works with the DID, super talented individual. She's part of the economic development office. We hired Rochelle Gallant, also from the county. We love hiring employees from the county, by the way. She's been terrific. So we really starting to build it up and focus on what an economic development office really should be doing. And that is focusing on maintaining the businesses that are here. Very important. Sometimes that's overlooked by a lot of economic development offices. Also attracting businesses here. And I have to agree with you. We're not looking to bring in a major corporation. We have to be realistic with this. But what we are seeing and what we are encouraging are a lot of smaller startup companies that are already here. Some of them are in the Rosemary district. Some of them are in other areas of the city. I know just the other day I went to lunch and I saw eight young people sitting together and they're talking about a business plan for the company that they were planning on starting here in Sarasota. And so, it's a lot easier in economic development to assist or help smaller companies that are starting to grow because they're homegrown and they eventually fund themselves. When you're trying to draw businesses to the city, they're expecting they're expecting money, they're expecting land, they're expecting a lot of things. I don't think we need to do that here. And you had mentioned, public art and our arts program. Mary Davis Wallace, who was also a fairly recent hire, was just an incredible job really elevating public art and the various kinds of things that we can do here in the city. A critical piece to our economy, not just public art, but the performing arts, all the way to the Curtis Comedy Club. I mean, there's so much going on here. We really need to focus not only on maintaining that, but also growing because that's a major part of our economy.
Couldn't agree more. Let's open it up to questions. We've got about 15 minutes for questions, and could we get the mic? Is this the roving mic back there? Bob?
Yes. I know we've come up with an affordable housing plan now, sort of, which is great. My concern for Sarasota isn't so much affordable housing as obtainable housing. Something that seems to be happening in all of these wonderful new buildings going up is that they're 3,000 square feet and then multiple millions of dollars. And that's not obtainable for, especially the youth, but an awful lot of people that are in a more affordable price range. And I don't know if there's things that could be done with reducing the parking density to make it more attractive to build smaller units. But I think there seems to be something that really needs to be placed. And one common thread of the architectural series was just that alone. You know, where I'm not saying we need to build micro units, but at least 1,000 square foot units instead of 3,000 square foot.
Great question. And one of the things that we learned is that smaller units don't necessarily mean affordable or attainable. I think probably experienced some of that here in the Rosemary district. But you know, with our attainable housing initiative, we can't mandate developers to provide affordable or attainable housing by state law. We had a whole series of things that we've already done, such as accessory dwelling units, which I think was kind of brought up in one of the projects that they presented. Cottage courts, we have the housing authority. These are all great, and they are a help, but they are not going to solve the huge problem that we're facing. We need thousands of really attainable housing units to be able to accommodate our workforce. And so with the initiative that we proposed, like I said, we couldn't mandate anything, but we could provide incentives such as density increase along the commercial corridors, potentially like 1 or 2 story height addition. With those kinds of incentives, that is attractive to the private sector, and that's where we really need to get a lot of our attainable housing provided from private developers, and so that was our approach. For downtown, that was already approved, and then Monday night the commercial corridors was approved. We required a certain percentage, actually it was 15% of the bonus units to, if you want to increase your density or potentially increase your height along the corridors, you had to provide 15% of the bonus units as attainable housing units. Attainable means really 3 things. For every project, they're required to provide housing from the 100 to 120, no more than a third, from 100 to 120% of the average median income, which for a family of 4 right now is roughly about 100,000. A third in the middle, and then a third at 60%, which is much lower. So, by doing that, you're getting different levels of housing for workforce housing for teachers, police officers, hospital workers, restaurant workers, all the way down to even people who are really, really desperate for housing. So it's already working. Our downtown effort, and I know in the very beginning everybody said you'll never be able to get affordable housing in downtown, it's too expensive. Well, we actually have 4 projects now that are proposing attainable housing and are in process right now. And we're hoping we'll get a similar response along the commercial corridors. Just to give you a little bit of a warning on this, so the economy is not doing that great, particularly from a banking and lending standpoint. And so it's probably going to be a little slow going initially until the lenders get a better read on which way the interest rates are going to go. Right now we're kind of sitting on that threshold. But we're still getting projects, and we're hoping if the interest rates drop, then we'll start seeing more activity. Over time, this is not going to happen all at once, obviously, but over time, we're really going to increase our attainable housing units in the city. Combine everything in the works, and we already have I think we have over 660 attainable housing units in process.
Great. Another question, this gentleman over.
Don't need to wait. I'm concerned, listening to you speak about green space, listening to the prior speakers come up and talk about building properties with more green space, more sidewalk space. As I come down Fruitville and I enter the roundabout at Tamiami, all I'm into is a giant concrete canyon. And you're building more buildings. There are more buildings planned for right there. Not to mention, I'm understanding that the Hyatt may be in play. And on the corner of Boulevard of the Arts and Tamiami is another high-rise going in there. So, as this gentleman's talking about, these people spending multi-millions of dollars on units, getting a peekaboo view, that's going to go away right quick. And the other thing that's going to happen is you're creating, there's no sidewalk space to speak of. Those buildings are built right on the street. And by the time you're done in there, you're going to create nothing but a concrete canyon. Everyone's going to look at the back of everybody else's building, and it doesn't appear to me, I'm having visions of Fort Lauderdale that I think is now regretting some of that. So, I'm hearing you talk, but I'm not seeing you do it.
Well, I think you're probably mostly talking about the Quay project.
Both of them. You got the Quay, then you got another one, I don't know if that's the same one, that's being built now, that they're just putting the facade on.
Yeah.
And then you got an empty lot right there that I believe there's a project approved for that.
That's the Quay project, and just to give you a little bit of history on that, I'm not sure how many years ago, but the city put together and secured an agreement with the developer and property owners of that property. It's actually like 9 or 10 sites. That was a deal made a long time ago, and we have very little flexibility just because we're so constrained based on that agreement.
But it slaps in the face everything you're talking about.
Yeah, we've had a real tough time with it. And I know, some of the buildings that are right along North Tamiami, a lot of their initial submittals were just making a blank wall and just facing inward. We really struggled with them because we pretty much had our hands tied, but we were saying, look, you need to activate along 41-2 because that eventually is going to be, obviously a major street, major entrance into the city. But everywhere else, we're especially with these new regulations in place, we'll be getting much better sidewalks. So,
well, the other thing that's going to create, I live on 41, and I live up near the Sarasota Bay Club. All right, and the traffic is backed up to my area right now, and those buildings. The ones that aren't, excuse me, let me put my hand in front of it. Those buildings aren't even occupied yet down on, at the end of Fruitville. And the others aren't even built yet. So now you get all those people out there now pressing the red light to cross the street. Think about when you have probably 1,000 more units going in there with all those buildings combined. You'll have the traffic backed up to Bradenton at any given day.
There's some truth in what you're saying. The one thing as far as the pedestrian experience along there, one thing that has changed is 41 is now, it wasn't designated before, is what's called a primary grid street. And without going into detail what that means, is that creates some additional requirements for glazing and so forth. Now, this is not, sir, going to address your concerns, but as far as mitigating this canyoning, as far as trees or the pedestrian experience, or even art in the roundabouts as some steps to, shall we say, soften the situation that is by a long shot not ideal. I will tell you the toasted mango, if you can place it, and the derelict motel next to it. A developer has assembled a bunch of parcels there, and so that's likely to be developed too. This is truth telling, and I know the city's in discussions with anything to try and again mitigate or soften some of these development projects, but. Some of this is built into property rights in Florida, and there's not a heck of a lot that could be done.
Yeah, and particularly along North Tamiami, going from Fruitville up north, you have very intense zoning on both sides of the street, 18 stories. They can build that by right, and that was already in place. Eventually, that'll be coming. One of the things, though, when I first got here, I got picked up at the airport when I was here for my job interview, and I drove down North Tamiami to downtown, and I said, man, what is this? Just this really unusual mix of different kinds of uses and hotels and all kinds of things. I said, this is the main entrance into the city. We got to do something about this. And so we worked with Florida DOT, and they were wonderful to work with. And so really from 14th Street down now, you have the roundabouts, much more landscaping, nicer sidewalks. It's a very different entrance into the city now. And we plan on moving northward of that, having a couple more roundabouts, but continuing those improvements northward on Tamiami. And eventually, we'll get to South Tamiami too, but that's a while off.
Another question, Jim Lampo.
I want to thank you for all of your service, and I think most of us in this room have been to a lot of other major cities, and I just came back from Atlanta, and I'm well acquainted with the DC Beltway and where you're from in Arlington, and we love this city. We're here because we choose this city. We didn't just land here for most of us. So we're here by choice, and we love it, but we don't want to be. The message is, I think you've been hearing from the community since you got here, Steve, is we do not want to be Atlanta or Fort Lauderdale or Miami. That's the overarching message here from the residents. We know that there's going to be progress. We know that we're popular, and it's very exciting to be in this city. But I can't wait to get back, whether I'm in Europe or whether I'm in Atlanta or even Pittsburgh. Can't wait to get back to Sarasota. We love what we have, and we want to preserve a lot of what we have. And I know that the balancing act between doing that and all the pressure for development is very tough on you.
I can't agree with you more. I love it here too. 10 years ago, there were no plans to be in the state of Florida. But 7 years ago, I got a job offer, and this place is fantastic. We don't want it to be a Fort Lauderdale, Atlanta, or any of those. We don't, and we're not going to go down that path. What we do though is, and I think it was mentioned by one of the speakers, we've got a great city here, but there's no reason why we can't make it greater. Perfect example is the Bay project. Okay, you have that southern portion of the Bay is finished now. You have this beautiful park, beautiful playground, activity space. Before it was a rundown parking lot, a hangout for the homeless, and an abandoned building. That was an opportunity that we saw that, hey, we can make this even better. And eventually, when that's completed, oh my gosh, that will be one of the places when people come to visit. I got to take you to the Bay because this place is really special. So I can't agree with you more, and we want to make it greater. It's great now. We want to make it greater.
This will be the last question for Mike, please.
Building on that last point, I've heard concerns from several businesses that are on Main Street. The Main Street we love because it's quirky, it's small businesses, it's individual, no chains, that they're getting priced out by their landlords. I don't know what can be done to incentivize those landlords not to do that. I have no idea, but to me it would be terribly sad if what happened in Key West happened here. Years ago when you went to Key West, it was all small, very quirky businesses. It was part of the character. And then it changed and the chains came in. Is there anything we can do to preserve the nature? I get actually a bit worried about the Main Street vision, having gone to the workshop last night, because I don't know that we want that much change. It can be improved. I know we can have more seating areas, more shade, things like that, but don't change the character, please.
I totally agree with you. And my concern is that, and you've probably seen this in cities around the country, sometimes you make improvements to streets and it's too perfect, it's too sterile. Every tree is 30 feet away, there's a nice bench there. We don't want to do that on Main Street. Main Street is unique, it's asymmetrical, it is quirky in some places, just like St. Armand's as well. That's what makes those streets so great. When I was in Annapolis, Maryland, we went through the exact same thing. How many of you been to Annapolis and downtown? Oh, wow, okay, great. Spectacular historic downtown. The property owners, the landlords got greedy. They ran up all the rents on the local businesses. The local businesses left. The chains came in. The chains failed because Annapolis Mall had them too. And eventually it shifted back to local businesses again. We don't want to get that far. The local businesses, that's part of what makes downtown Sarasota special. We're going to do everything, especially from an economic development standpoint, we're going to do everything we can to help them out. So.
Let me just add my 2 cents on that. I think to make Main Street more accessible, to make it less intimidating to cross Fruitville, to make it easier to get from, say, the quay with an I-ride type of system, so it's more convenient, it's easier, it's safer, is one thing. It's not the whole answer, but knitting together so the whole community has a somewhat easier access to the downtown, I think is one arrow in the quiver. And let me just close. I think we're on as far as time. Steve, really, was it like a conversation with you?
Fireside chat.
And I look, the elephant in the room is there's some tension between staff, planning staff, and the community at times, and I hope that you would regard DSCA as a sometimes annoying partner, but a group and a committed to loving this city and trying to find that middle path, if you will. We've got some concerns, but I hope that we're trying to be an honest broker between the interest of our residents and the real world. So as we move along, let's renew that pledge to try and have a dialogue and an honest back and forth, shall we say, and I answer the phone most times when you call, so please, if you'd convey that to everybody in your staff. But I wanted to thank you for being here, and we didn't script any of this, so I don't think there were any big gotchas, were there?
No.
Okay. All right, say thank you.
Thanks, David, and we really have a lot of very similar goals and aspirations for Sarasota as you and the residents. All I ask is that if you hear something, or you hear something that you don't like, or you're questioning something, just give us a call and contact us, and we'll tell you what's really going on, because there is so much misinformation floating around out there. It gets very frustrating for us too. And I know it's not coming from you, David, or anybody, but if you have a question or concern, just give us a call. Or if you want me to come again, come and speak and maybe clarify some things, I'd love to do it. So.
With that said, we'll conclude, and we do have wine and beer over here, so I hope you can stick around for a little while if Steve's got a few minutes to yak with him and some of our speakers here. Any questions? So thanks everybody for coming, and we really appreciate it.